everyone, welcome to Beyond Ray. Today I'm just joined with Margaret, Ginger's out, and we have an awesome guest, Caterina Rizzoni. We met Caterina originally, I think, at the Women in Design Deep Dive. Caterina is the senior lead industrial designer at Kaleidoscope and the director of conferences for IDSA. For anybody that doesn't know, IDSA is our parent organization, and so they are the ones behind sort of our existence and the structure of industrial design professional network in the US. Yeah, Kat, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here today. Great to talk to you guys.
Kat, I was really intrigued to see that you've been involved in IDSA, running different chapters, and then doing the conference work for the last 6 years. What is it that IDSA really brings into your community building and experience that your day job doesn't quite cover? Why are you so involved in this organization?
And before we jump to that, for anyone who's living under the rock, IDSA is Industrial Designers Society of America. I think the biggest and the only professional organization for the ID here.
Yeah, and IDSA is also part of like the World Design Organization, which folks might be familiar with. So it sort of like ladders up into this other association of associations. So lots of layers, good layers. Yeah, so I think one of the big reasons that I got involved in the first place is I just loved like the studio culture when I was in school. And I even got involved with IDSA when I was a student. I was in the sort of student chapter leadership, and that was one of the things that sort of got me in the first place. And I think for me, it was just that magical sense of community that I got going to my very first conference and realizing there's like, oh my gosh, there's other designers out there. There's other people out there who are doing this and who are willing to like talk about the different techniques that they use and the way they design and share that. And then you can go and be with all these other like-minded folks. My program in school was pretty small. I went to Ohio State and my graduating class had like 16 people. So to see more than 20 designers in one place was kind of mind-blowing. Yeah, so I think it was just that sense of connectivity and community, but it's also given me a chance to grow into like leadership roles that I don't think I would have had a chance to step into at this point in my career. I've been involved in IDSA. So I had a funny realization recently that I've been with IDSA longer than I've been with any job, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. And that through line is cool. Like I've had my own career arc within IDSA, going from like student chapter to vice chair to eventually chair of the Cincinnati chapter, and then stepping up to the board of directors. And so it's been cool to kind of have that parallel growth path in addition to my, day job as an industrial designer, which I also love. But yeah, I think the community aspect is really big for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to the leadership opportunities that you mentioned, what do you think is so different about IDSA versus a typical job that like allows you to have that access?
I think in a typical job, there's the expectation of experience. Like you have a certain number of years of experience and you progress at a pace that's pretty much matches the number of years that you work, unless you're like incredible and you get promoted like really fast. But I think in general, most folks' career arcs have that track. I think one of the cool parts about this as like a volunteer organization is there's people from like all different levels of their careers involved. And it's a surprising equalizer in that sense. So you can be like volunteering with people who own their own companies and people who are like, leaders in their own organizations, while you might be a, associate designer or junior designer. And it's kind of cool to get that access to that experience. And I think for me, it was neat to get involved and have people not really questioning my credibility and just sort of having my work speak truly for itself outside of my years of experience. And so after, working with the events group for a few years within IDSA and coordinating a lot of local chapter events, just sort of, the work that I had done in the events that I had hosted really kind of spoke for themselves. And I was clearly like growing in the organization. And like the board of directors position is actually kind of funny because I didn't submit for it at all. And I don't think I ever would have like applied to do that. This kind of happened when I was like 25, I think, when they like first brought it up. And that was like pretty early in one's career to have that question. I had like submitted to be on the Women in Design. Like there are the chapters, which were at the time new. And I wanted to, work with a chapter in the Midwest and, get involved here. And I think the Midwest chapter representative was like Leah Stewart. And they were like, do you want to run against her? Do you want some other role? And I was like, I think Leah's got this. Let me see if there's another thing I can help out with. And they reached out for that board of directors role, which just kind of came out of left field. I wasn't really expecting at that point in my career to have something like that floated. So that was definitely a scary thing to like say yes to. And I think that that's one of the challenges of like getting to play outside of your years of experience. The flip side of that coin is that you can find yourself kind of out of your depth or in a situation that I'm like enthusiastic, but I guess you probably couldn't say I'm like qualified on paper for a board role in that sense. I don't have like decades of industry experience. I think when I joined, everyone on the board was at least 20 years older than me. I was the youngest person by like pretty big margin. And everyone else on the board is like, they're like VPs and CEOs, and they run their own teams and their own companies. And, I'm still a contributor in my organization. So it's definitely kind of brings this different perspective. But I don't know. I don't think that's been a limitation. I think it's been a strength in getting to like ask some interesting and challenging questions because I'm not a director or a VP or a leader in my own organization in that sense. And so I have definitely the contributor's point of view. And I actually think that's been really helpful for like getting stuff done and, moving towards bringing events and ideas and new initiatives like all the way to completion. I'm very familiar with what it takes to get that kind of work done. And I'm not used to pointing to other people and saying, can you do that for me? I'm used to being down there in the trenches. And so it's fun, to get kind of hands-on with it.
Did you want to plan events, or is it the role that was handed to you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think kind of both. I think YP Wong is like on the committee that like finds people for these roles. And I think I had like interacted with her on some events. So she like knew I was super passionate about events. But now that I know more about the board of directors, like if I got to pick a board role, it would be the one that I'm in. I think this is like events were kind of what got me into the whole community in the first place. And I think like just like getting to be involved in IDSA, part of it is so that I can keep going to events. So I, at some point, like, early in my career, I really wanted to start like traveling and going to conferences and stuff. And I realized after I graduated school that if you want your company to pay for that, you either have to make a really good case or you have to be like a certain level of seniority or be involved in sales or something. And I was like, shoot, I can't really afford to go to all these conferences, but I really wanted to, super passionate about that. And so I just started offering to like write like an article about the event or to like cover it and write a summary of what the speakers said and sort of share that after the event. So I started offering that. I think the like Women in Design 2019, no, it was maybe before that. It was the one in Chicago. There was a conference and I wrote an article after that. No one asked me to do it. And then I was like, I wrote this article. Let me see if I can use that to get into some other events. Yeah, so I had started like writing these articles to basically just get people to pay for my ticket to the event. And these were like not super expensive events. But I think I like reached out to Hector Silva from Square One and was like, hey, you guys are having this conference. I'd love to go to it. Can I write an article? And would you maybe pay for my ticket in exchange? And weirdly enough, they were down with that. Oh. And so I just kept doing that to like go to as many events as possible. And so it was just like not just hosting them, but like attending and just getting all of those opportunities to like be in the community. So yeah, I would say it was kind of a happy like meeting. Like I didn't pick the role kind of came to me, but it would have been the role that I would picked if I had the chance.
So clearly, you have a lot of energy and this is something that fills you up, but you've been doing it for so long. Does the work ever feel hard to get yourself motivated to do? How do you keep it feeling, fresh and engaging for you as well?
Yeah, I think part of what's been keeping it fresh and engaging is increasing the scope and the scale of the events that I'm doing. So, from starting out doing like little student merit awards and small chapter events to, starting doing like the first event that I fundraised for, we raised like $10,000 to pay for the event. And we had like a paid speaker. And that was like this huge learning experience for me. And that event also put me in contact with T. Chang, who was one of the speakers that we paid. And so that was really influential for me later on. But I think just like getting to go from those events now up to the national events, which are part of a bigger experience. So I'm an industrial designer, but as part of my like day job, I would say I'd like intersect with service design and experience design. And I think that like I see a lot of that in the events and the experience of like IDSA is kind of intangible with the exception of the conferences. And those are kind of that one touch point that people have that is like in-person, physical, tangible. Maybe the exception is like the magazine, the innovation magazine that folks get. But it's like the way that most people experience IDSA is through conferences. And so that shapes a lot of that experience and the relationship people have with the organization. And so if it's like this, pairing of like servant leadership of wanting to like make the experience the best as possible for the people in the community attending, trying to like, truly create content that speaks to what the community is looking for. But then I think also the other component being of just like getting to design this complex experiential system and get to think about how over the arc of the 4 years of my tenure, I'm, shaping the way, not just that the content of the events that we do, but how we plan them, how we execute them, what it is like to experience an event, how we take feedback from folks and integrate it into the next events. A lot of the like behind the scenes, chewy structures, committees, methodologies, that kind of stuff I find really exciting. And I just love working on that. And I think that has really given me a lot to sink my teeth into is the strategic side. Yeah, that's definitely not something I get to play with too much in my day job, for sure.
Sort of a design process for event planning. That's funny.
Yeah, absolutely. We recently started like mood boarding at the beginning, and it's kind of like fun. Like, honestly, we didn't have time to do a lot of this stuff when I started because I think some of our processes were a little bit like, felt like we were always playing catch up and we were scheduling stuff too late to do cool things and always like trying to, just take care of what's in the moment. So it's definitely been a process of like, we're on year 3 now, and I feel like we're finally getting ahead and thinking about like the future. And that's like that really exciting part where now we're starting to like put together these concepts for what the, events could feel like and putting together mood boards and really diving into the design side, which I think like having a committee helps too. Because when I started, it was pretty solo work. It was just like me and the 2 staff members from IDSA. And then we would like recruit a little conference planning group for each event, but we didn't have like a standing group. But now we've got sort of this standing committee that works on them. And it's really fun to, it's like a group of designers whose day job is design, and they're all coming together and volunteering. And so cool to see folks from like other walks of life and getting to co-create that with them also, that design process.
Since you just mentioned T. Chang, let's talk a little bit about design allyship and also the role that she plays in it, the role you play in it. For someone who doesn't know, T. Chang shook the industry a little bit some time ago, publishing an article on Yanko Design, which was about a percentage of female working in industrial design. And it's an infamous article because the shit show started in comments where people were very moved by the fact that there are any women in the industry at all. What's your take on that?
Moved is a very generous word. I mean, they were angry, right? There was a lot of backlash.
Yeah, I mean, I think that conversation galvanized so much meaningful change for women in the industry. Like, I think that just thinking about a few friends of mine who themselves also felt so moved by that to start their own initiatives and work and effort. I think that was a big, and the data that T shared was a huge wake-up call, because up until that point, we really hadn't gotten concrete data on the like percentages of women who were employed in industrial design. There was some research that had been done by Kelly Walters, and there was like a little bit of data out there that was sort of hinting it wasn't good, but really nothing that quite revealed it like that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think for myself, like a lot of folks, that was that huge wake up call. And because I was like a little familiar with T, she and I had worked together. We had, interacted a little bit on social media since we met in person for that conference. And, I started reaching out. We were chatting about it. I think what we landed on and what we kept hearing from a lot of our friends also who were, women in the industry who were participating in the comments on that post and, confronted with this question was there's a lot of like, what can I do? And a lot of that coming from not just women who are experiencing it, but I think people who maybe not experiencing it firsthand had been woken up a little bit to the situation within the industry. A lot of, men that I was like friends with, allies who had, sort of reflected and said like, wow, this is pretty horrifying. So what can somebody like me do about this? And I think that, T and I started this conversation with the intent of equipping those people with the skills and the tools that they need to be better allies and to help support inclusion in the workplace. And, I don't have to tell you guys that industrial design is behind the curve, even compared to other industries that lack parity. I want to say somebody told me recently that it's like, I don't know, like oil rig workers have more gender parity than industrial designers. Don't quote me on that. Google it, but it's rough out there. And obviously, like, we should be a lot further along. But like, at that point, yeah. So anyway, I just, that really shook me. And I remember like bringing that conversation. I'm pretty sure I just took screenshots on my phone And I called like a team meeting in the office and I was like, guys, got to talk about this. There's this post on social media and I am feeling some type of way. I just wanted to like process it with my studio at work too, and to see what like other people were thinking and feeling about this. And I think that kind of reinforced the response of like, wow, this is horrible, but what does anyone do about something like that? A problem where it's systemic and it feels so much bigger than any one person. So that was kind of the birth of Design Allyship. And we really originally just intended to make a document, a booklet that was like, I would say 20 pages. We did a bunch of research. We got a ton of designers to weigh in from a bunch of different organizations, giving kind of their best advice and wisdom. And I would say that tool was, was the right tool at the right time. We did some like social media content. And I think it was interesting to think like, after doing some of that social media content, that I think we were reaching a lot of like already sympathetic ears. Like we weren't hitting people who had never considered allyship before. We were hitting women who were like already, frustrated and, maybe giving them resources to share. But I think to some degree, I would feel a little disheartened seeing the likes and responses being mostly from like women, queer people of colors, but not like the allies that you would hope would be engaging. So I actually think that was part of my willingness to step into the board role. Is I did have to give up the design allyship work in order to take that board position. But I think for me, it was a chance to like, okay, I'm going to like put this into action. And, I spent basically a year studying equity and studying allyship. You got to put out all that content, you've got to do a lot of research. And so I was, reading a ton of articles and listening to podcasts and reading books and just kind of educating myself on equity in the workplace and effective strategies for allyship, for uplifting women, where to spot inequity, how to address that. And, I wanted to address that industry-wide at IDSA, but then I also kind of concurrently got involved within my company, within my organization at Kaleidoscope, and initiated also concurrently our DEI organization, which for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, that stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I think I was like part of what I realize now is a cohort of people who in like 2021 and 2022, sort of response to that summer of racial reckoning, started like bootstrapped DEI organizations with their company with no experience, no prior knowledge in this except for a bunch of, Googling and research. And I, feel really proud about the work that we did, but I think that's definitely was an eye opener for like, yes, this is a full-time position that somebody needs to be responsible for equity within an organization. So yeah, it was kind of that post like really catalyzed, I would say, like the next 4 years of like work that I've done to kind of, shape the industry, shape my own career, my own job, like the company I work at. But yeah, it's definitely a labor of love. I do it for the women who are going to be in this industry and this career after me, thinking about making it a better place for them.
We can definitely direct people towards the resources that you've already published, but while we have you here and people are listening, are there some concrete techniques to put into practice that you feel like really stick out as things that people could leave and introduce to their own office?
Oh, I like that question. Definitely check out the resources. We've got like a resource library on the Design Allyship site. I would say if I had to give, maybe any major takeaways, it might just be not to be shy about voicing and advocating for yourself, to kind of trust your gut. And if something is rubbing you the wrong way or it's not working out in your organization, I would just say don't be afraid to try to change it. Stuff definitely won't change if you don't do anything. And, it's definitely very scary. And I think at the beginning, like there was this sense that talking about that stuff was taboo, like in our office. And it was very fraught with like, I don't know, there was a sense we were going to get in trouble. Like when women were going like off site to have conversations because we were like, are we going to get in trouble for talking about equity at work? And no one ever said it like that. But we did like leave the building. And then like as time went on, the conversations became like more mainstreamed as more people were engaged. And it was really this like grassroots movement within the office of just like women, queer people, people of color, like talking to each other and just sort of sharing their experiences. And so I think like you don't even have to advocate to leadership, but just talking to your peers about your experiences and not being shy to voice if you think something is amiss. And, trying also, maybe the second most valuable piece of advice I would give is to grant people grace and to never assume that somebody who is behaving inequitably isn't, that they're not doing it intentionally, that this is sort of out of ignorance. And even if it is malicious, it just puts everyone in this good spot where it's easy to say like, hey, surely you didn't mean to, use that term the way that you did. That was kind of offensive, but maybe you could try this instead next time. And just kind of working off the assumption that nobody's doing it to hurt you. It's just sort of the natural outcome of the system. And I think that helped with a lot of the conversations to make it go from feeling like we're voicing something kind of hostile to we're just having an open conversation about how to improve the organization together. So that was a real, I would say probably over the last 2 years, major shift that has happened. But I would say it comes out of not just me. I mean, a lot of brave people also sharing their opinions and advocating and saying, hey, that made me uncomfortable, or I didn't like this, or I've noticed this pattern. And then following up with data, getting permission from HR to dig into the demographics and the history of the demographics and, who has direct reports and how much are people paid and trying to actually get tangible metrics on those equity issues so that you can confront them head on.
I would love to have a big database of salaries that's more realistic than just Glassdoor or something. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about that feeling that you touched on of I might get in trouble just for voicing this thought even to the other people that I work with. That's so real. And I wonder how we all end up with this very integral sense that we are causing a problem just to voice things like this, right? That speaks very much to the very, very male dominant culture that design is living in. To make the people we work with uncomfortable feels to us like it might be threatening to our job and our livelihood. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, to be honest, I think sometimes it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that DEI work has had a positive impact in my career in some capacities, but it's also had a negative impact. And I think exactly what you're saying of some colleagues feeling like that the fact that this work is being done is a threat to them personally, directly, like there's something being taken away from them when the table gets bigger and more seats get added. So rather than making a bigger environment where more people are involved, they feel like there's sort of a zero-sum game, something's being taken away. And I actually got really negative feedback from some of my colleagues about the DEI work and my involvement in it.
Wow.
I think that surprised me. And I thought that was something to just be conscious of. And that even if I disagree with that feedback, and even if leadership disagrees with that feedback, it still gets given and it's still, on the record. And you still have, it's just sort of interesting that you can still be accused of being a man hater in 2024, which seems kind of crazy to me. But yeah, no, I mean, I guess I would say that some of that fear, I didn't think it was as real as it is, but I would definitely say you have to be pretty brave and you have to have a pretty thick skin and acknowledge that to do this work will make people uncomfortable for reasons that are all about them, not about you.
Yeah.
And the people who felt hurt or threatened by that work, I think that it just comes out of a place that they're in mentally, but not a reflection of the value of the work or what it brings to other people. So I think it's just good to remember that, in those situations, that feedback like that just says more about the giver than the person being given, if that makes sense.
Right. And it actually does end up potentially creating more community for you with the other people that are outspoken, right? So it's this trade-off of being willing to make some risks or sacrifices in order to also move towards the shared community builders. But that's tough. I mean, especially if your workplace has a clear attitude of it being challenging, for sure you're taking a risk.
How do you stay true to yourself, but don't jeopardize your design career? Because you are industrial designer first. That's your biggest passion, I would guess.
I guess that's a question that I kind of wrestle with, because there are definitely times when you're well, was it worth it if I tanked my career for it? And I've struggled with that question a lot in the last year and a half. That feedback that I mentioned resulted in my promotion getting delayed.
Wow.
And I mean, I think that that's a very real question where I don't want to feel like I'm abandoning the good work and the community and what I care about. But at the same time, you kind of have to really question is I'm also already working at a disadvantage as a woman in this industry. And then to be a woman in this industry that people know that you are into advocacy and this stuff, it kind of can give you a reputation that doesn't make it any easier to proceed or progress in your career. So I think that that's been part of the challenge and the balance. But I think at the end of the day, I don't feel like my advocacy is negotiable in that sense. I can't give it up. And it's something I've done my whole life. It's just sort of baked into who I am. It's something I really care about and am passionate about. And I think maybe understanding that those are trade-offs, but that it's worth it, that I would rather do this work rather than just proceed and succeed on my own. And I'm like, one of my passions is in lifting others up and less so for like my own betterment. And at the end of the day, I feel like I have a pretty good role already. I'm well compensated, like I'm not struggling. So it feels like maybe I can be content with where I am and acknowledge that maybe I can't get to the top, but that's the cost of being outspoken. But that's okay. That's a trade-off that I'm accept. Wish obviously that we were in an environment where that's not a negative.
Mm-hmm.
What was the scariest thing you decided to do at your workplace?
Oh,
To advocate for your values.
oh my gosh. I gave a really scary presentation with some data to our CEO, and this was so spicy. This was after we had like kind of given this original like, hey, so all the women were talking and we're worried and we feel like things are not good for women at this organization. And the leadership was like, okay, let's dig in. Let's take some time. Let's see what the problem is. Like, we hear you. Have at it. Here's resources, here's time. And so myself and a couple other folks took that time to dig into that data that I had mentioned, the demographics, the hiring, who has power within the organizations, and then moreover, like the historical data. So seeing like where the org had been over the last 5 or 10 years. And we organized it like a research presentation. So I do design research at work. And so I think that was like trying to be like, see, I'm just doing like the same stuff I do for our clients. But for us to try to say like, look, it has sort of this structure, this value that you already, believe in. But this time the tough messages are coming from inside the house. That was super scary. And I don't know that I needed to be as scared as I was, but you're like in your mid-20s and you're going to like go into a presentation with your company's CEO and tell them all the things that are wrong and all the inequality in the org that you see. And here's the things that they should do to fix it. And you're like, who the heck am I to be telling them this stuff? Yeah, definitely kind of scary. But I mean, our CEO, Ben, is, he's a person of color. He's, extremely welcoming of a lot of this work. And so, it was really well received and resulted in change. But my gosh, I was like, I mean, like literally trembling, like my hands were shaking for sure when I was giving that presentation.
I cannot believe you did that. That is incredible. Oh my gosh. Should we all be so brave? Wow.
Oh, yeah. But close number two, honestly, was that first when I was like, hey, team, Yanko post. Please look at it, because I had never talked about equity with my team before.
Right.
And I was, when I joined, I was the only woman on the team. And so I came from a team that was like mostly women. And so that was kind of new territory. And I was like, ooh, I don't know what kind of people these people are. It's like, all right, I'm joining a team full of men. That could go any number of directions. It could be a real, boys club or a bro culture, or people could turn out to be, good allies. And we ended up with like more of the latter, I would say. But yeah, definitely that was also maybe equally as scary, was just bringing it up for the first time.
I think that I want to ask more about your actual design work too in this context. So you work on medical products, right? Is that the majority of your work? Is that exclusively?
Gosh, I'd say that's changed over the last few years. Like in the first couple of years at Kaleidoscope, I did pretty much exclusively medical devices. But I would say in the last couple of years, it's transitioned to be a little bit more like service design research. We've been working with like a client in the logistics space who has these like really complex like factory environments full of like robotics and interconnected systems. And so my job in the last couple of years has just been sort of this user needs advocate in that environment, and sort of stepping into, maybe it's like a product, but maybe it's also the way the system is set up. So it has definitely shifted, but I would say the commonality between the medical and that work is just that like user advocacy, where if I change something in that factory environment, it's going to impact the lives of like 1 million people who use that product every day. And if you design something that causes a repetitive stress injury, for example, that has a pretty high impact. Same thing with the medical. I think it's like, yeah, well, that's going to go inside a person forever. So don't mess it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if you would have a correlation, but I wanted to ask what you think being a minority designer does for your capacity to actually do a really good job designing these products. And I want to ask how the experiences you're talking about in the workplace of maybe like being seen as a more outspoken designer has impacted either your advocating more for products or you're like having limited access to touch certain products, right? So sort of the pros and cons of your position to your work.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's funny. I think sometimes like the perception as like a minority designer is that you're bringing your identity to the table, that I'm like designing as a queer woman. But I think that for me, it's more just like I understand how important it is to design with, not for. So I would say, like, if anything, I bring even less of my identities to the table, with the exception of like products that I'm personally familiar with or like have a very, close understanding of. But like, actually, my perspective has given me this chance to say, like, oh, I'm almost never going to be the right person to speak to what this product should be. So instead, let me facilitate at every possible opportunity touch points with end users, opportunities for co-creation and co-design. I cannot do design without research. I am in like the very lucky position to get to spend about half of my time doing research. And I feel really blessed for that, because I think it gives me like exactly what you're talking about, this idea of designing, with folks, and the ability to take myself out of the equation and to acknowledge that, like, I don't know best. Sometimes I will give my, best professional advice. I think as designers, we're always, coming up with opinions really quickly. We've got, new situations, new information, and you have to kind of make snap decisions. But yeah, I think that that's a big part of it, bringing to the table. Now, that being said, there's definitely been moments where I'm designing products that are like for women specifically, like designing menstrual products or surgical products that will end up in women's bodies. And in those situations, definitely, I'm not afraid to be that outspoken person and, share my thoughts, sometimes bluntly, in that setting, more bluntly with the internal team, because I think it's like we have this chance to be real with each other and try to get out ahead of like any potential issues with the product that we're designing. Like there was this medical product that we were creating that was, I worked on a few products for reconstructive mastectomies. And so throughout that, really learned how high of a infection rate. It's like 60% of all reconstructive mastectomies get infected, which is pretty horrifying. Yeah, it's a very high number. And the infections are horrible, and it can mean losing the new breast. Like after you've gotten the cancer removed, you get a reconstruction. But if it gets infected, that can be your one shot.
Wow.
Is it the same for breast implants?
Not nearly so dangerous for breast implants, thankfully. It's the reason it's so high a rate of infection is because the reconstruction happens after the cancer has been removed. And so there's a lot of more missing tissue. There's sort of more opportunities for infection. There's more opened up. Just a straight like breast implant is less traumatic than this sort of reconstructive process. And so I had been working on a couple of products in the area, so I was like already familiar with the procedure. And we were working with this physician who had a novel method where he was using this compound and injecting it into the space between the like chest wall and the skin. To what you have to do is create space before actually doing the implants. You do the reconstruction, then you put something that's called a breast spacer in. It's like implanted under the skin for like 6 weeks. Usually they're silicone with water inside, and you like inject them with water to actually like create more space for the eventual implant. And so this physician was using a compound that had an antibiotic agent in it, which is brilliant. I mean, it was like cutting the rate of infection in this like incredible way and really bringing it down. But the downsides were like horrifying. Like this compound had to be poured in, and then it gets really hot. It's exothermic. So it was like burning the tissue when it was like setting up, and then it's set up to be like hard. So it's like this brittle, hard material. And then women have this like rock hard thing in their chest for like 6 weeks. And then when it's time to take it out, the surgeon has to like break it with a hammer and remove the pieces from the chest cavity.
Oh, that sounds so traumatic in and of itself.
Yeah, I think the term barbaric comes to mind.
Yeah.
It's just horrifying. And so like, I actually don't think I was even on the project originally. I think maybe I got invited to the brainstorm, and that was how I heard about it. And I think there were no women involved originally. And I like reached out to one of the PMs, and I was like, hey, I don't know, maybe you could resource this a little differently. And I did not volunteer, but I did manage to get myself put on the project, and was able to kind of in that setting, like really advocate and say like, hey, as a woman, I don't think I would love having this solid, brittle thing in my chest for 6 weeks and then having it broken with a hammer. I don't think I would like love that as a patient. And, it wasn't very like woman-centric design, but it wasn't either very human-centric or patient-centric or really anything. I mean, it was incredible infection prevention technique, which was the surgeon's goal. So in that setting, I was like very blunt, like I said, with the internal team and saying like, hey, this product should not go out on market. I think we did get a chance to do some user research where we took like illustrations, and even the illustrations were horrifying enough to users that we were actually able to get the project canceled, which I'm pretty proud of, to be honest, because it was definitely a product that needed to be rethought. And the antibiotic agent is, incredible, needs to, be considered, but certainly not in that format. And we had just come off another project with that client where we had relied too heavily on one surgeon's techniques and preferences. And I mean, we spent like a lot of money on a product that shouldn't exist because it was just designed for one person and not the market. And so I think we were able to kind of point to that, as well as to sort of say, hey, in our professional opinion, this isn't something that's going to be really like user centric. It's not going to be a popular product to have out on market. And so we sort of made that case for the client more diplomatically. But yeah, with that internal team, it was like, guys, we can't do this. How do we stop them?
Yeah, good job. I mean, that's like definitely sticking your neck out and making a good impact. What you were saying about research earlier is really intriguing to me. I think that if you are any sort of minority, you know what it is to not be the automatic person that something is designed for, or like the person that's sort of thought of as the stereotype that fits whatever scenario is happening. And I think that is potentially why more women gravitate towards research, or like more of us prioritize that, right? Because at least I can speak to my work experience. It became very, very important for me to get the men that I worked with to lean on research, because if not, the other option was just that we would go with like what generally worked for the average guy. And that seemed to them to fit the scenario best until we sort of could prove that was not our main user, or could prove that there like needed to be a wider audience reached. Curious your thoughts on that.
Okay, I'm really intrigued by something you're saying, and I think it's resonating with me, which is the idea of like without research, you have to have a really good reason for people to listen to you. And I do wonder if that's a gendered phenomenon. And if perhaps women lean on research because it's hard to argue with data. And I have certainly been in situations where I'm like pretty passionate about a path or a choice, that the team should make, and to just get sort of dismissed out of hand. And I think that maybe the research is an answer to that, of being able to say, okay, you might not agree with me out of hand, but here's why I'm right. Here's the data and the numbers and the incontrovertible facts that say, yeah, we should do this. This is right for humans and for people. So I don't know. That's kind of my gut feeling, is that a little bit comes out of needing to justify maybe more than the average designer our points of view.
Yeah,
that sounds very true. Oh yeah, I can relate to this as well. I have so many stories I cannot say it publicly. we can have a chat later. Yes, everything resonates with me. But like what I wanted to ask you more about the design that you're making, you gave us great example how you killed really bad solutions. But tell us more about projects to which you pour all this empathy in a positive way, and how you connect with the products you design.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And you're right. I mean, of all the projects that I've worked on, like I'm so proud of killing that project, but it's not going to go out into the world and like go be something good or contribute something positive. Yeah, I think there's one of the projects I worked on really early in my career is, I think, a really great example. And this is something that became almost like a North Star for me of how to do empathy right. This was when I worked at Design Central in Columbus. And I was working with a team that was on the Always adult incontinence lineup. And so this was, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, Always came out with adult incontinence products. They'd just done pads and like menstrual products up until that point. They wanted to make not just like incontinence pads, but also pants, like pull-up style adult diapers, if you will. Although I think that term is obviously really fraught. And so I jumped into that project, and it was actually like one of the very first things I worked on as a professional. And I remember I was like the first or second day of my internship, I came into the office and they're like, okay, we're working on this project. And I was already, I guess maybe I'll back up a little bit, because I had an argument with my professor like right before that, where he was like, you should do a diaper as a solution for this project. And I was like, no. Designers don't make diapers. Industrial designers don't make diapers. So then I walk in on the first day of my internship and they're like, welcome, you're going to be making diapers.
No way.
Oh, yeah. It was like, okay, there's my humble pie. I will eat it. I did tell the professor, I was like, yeah, so you were right. If he's listening now, you got it, Scott. But yeah, so I walked in and started that project, and they basically they gave me a pair of the adult incontinence pants, and they were like, hop into the bathroom, give them a try. Go ahead and wet yourself. And I was like,
What?
that is exciting. Thank you. I'm going to do that at home and not in the office. But I
Wow.
did take them home and I did try them out. And that was such a empathy moment for me. I was at first I was like, oh my God, this is so weird. Like, is this what design is like? And then I was like, wow, this is horrible. I actually suddenly feel very strongly that this product needs to be improved. I did not enjoy my experience. And it just kind of from there, I think that was like, I was working with a whole team of like, senior and lead folks who had so much experience, and they had really crafted this incredible research process where they were kind of getting to the root of like the shame and discomfort around adult incontinence and why it's so hard for people to talk about. And like, I didn't know, but like 1 in 3 women over the age of 18 experiences adult incontinence. So that's like one of us, basically,
Right,
at least.
right.
And it's just such a high number. You never would know that it's so pervasive, but there's just such an aspect of shame. And so I think for this project, the whole essence of it was to provide dignity through this adult incontinence product. And the team, I didn't get to go on this research trip as like this little baby designer, but the team like went to France and they did research on lingerie and on like what it's like to be sexy and beautiful. And they were like looking at like lingerie trends and like, what is it that makes women feel like incredible in their skin? And when they open up their underwear drawer, they get that like delight moment. And so then taking all of that research of like the aspirational, shame-free, dignity filled experience of what this product could be like, and then taking that to the table and designing from there. That was so powerful. And I feel like I just learned a lot too about designing for like taboo spaces and for things that people are kind of uncomfortable talking about. I worked on adult incontinence, on pessaries, on tampons, on pads, on all of these things, toilet paper even, like that are pretty unglamorous. But my gosh, like they're used by so many people. And yeah, I just thought that adult incontinence, the idea of like feeling like you can go out and wear this, product under your clothes and not be like embarrassed or ashamed. We were really focused on the feel and sound of it. So like sound was something that was really powerful. The crinkling is, for those of you who are menstrual product users, you might be familiar with that, like crinkle of the pad wrapper in the stall. Nobody wants that moment. It's kind of similar when you walk, that rustling. There's this huge paranoia for wearers of this product that people know, or the silhouette being so based off of baby diapers and how undignified that is as a woman in your 40s and 50s. And so, doing the silhouette and the shaping based on lingerie again, and like taking those cuts and those silhouettes and those lines and translating that into a product that up until that point had been just really undervalued, underutilized. We like at that point, the vast majority of adult incontinence pants were just like, white and super puffy and bulky and really just not something that you would want to wear outside of a like home care setting.
Right.
And since that product launched, I think it's been really successful. They've extended the line and started offering like lines of black and like lace themed, not just adult incontinence, but menstrual products too. Just trying to like match what's in the underwear drawer, basically.
You're making me think of a lot of, there are like multiple underwear brands that are trying to replace like pads and tampons and all that. And it seems like they're getting a lot of headway actually.
Yeah, that was, we were designing this right when Thinx was really starting to come out, like those soft cups. There was just at that point, so much innovation in the menstrual hygiene space, because I think that, thanks actually in part to folks like T. Chang, who are, destroying taboos about like sexual well-being and menstruation and that kind of stuff. I feel like design also had this moment where, oh yeah, cool, we can design menstrual products and that can be glamorous, and you can do stuff like Thinx or like the menstrual cups or like Yona and the speculum, and like you can do these products and all of a sudden it's not shameful. It's beautiful, it's meaningful, it's impactful. And it was cool to have that be like where my career started, was to jump into that space of innovation for women. And I was designing with women. My bosses were women, their bosses were women, our clients were women. We had men on our team and they would absolutely pull on a pair of those incontinence pants. They would put a pad in their underwear. They were committed.
Really?
And yeah, that was a really cool experience. Yeah. I loved that.
I love that. How do you get people to feel comfortable sharing? Like, I think user research in this space is a really nuanced activity, probably, right? Like you're talking about, maybe you create this space of confidence and like empowerment, but then what else do you do?
Ooh, I like that. And actually, as you were speaking, I think I just kind of connected the dots a little bit full circle too, with I think that the skills that I use as a user researcher are also the skills that I use as somebody who serves the community as an event planner and a moderator. And I think it's just a huge amount of that a dose of that empathy, but also like reading the room and reading people's, facial responses and body movements and tone of voice and trying to intuit how they feel and then make them feel even more comfortable. And you want to get people, if you're doing an interview or moderating a panel, you want to get people to a space where they are in flow almost, where they feel comfortable with you. They feel like they can share freely. They feel like even in this conversation, I feel like it's just the three of us hanging out. I'm like, I've already forgotten that we have an audience, like that kind of like, I'm not worried about what people are thinking. I'm just telling you how I feel. And I think there's a lot of conscious and unconscious work that goes into making people comfortable. And I think that that's a gift or talent maybe, because I think it's something you can like work on too and cultivate that of being just like really aware of other people's emotional state and trying to respond in ways that make them more comfortable so that you can elicit honesty and that feedback. And I guess to tie it to the DEI stuff too, it's kind of like a safe space, right? Like creating a safe space where you can make the person feel like they can trust you and have that conversation and confidence, but moreover, that you're going to do something meaningful with what they're sharing with you. Mm-hmm. They're not just having a conversation, but that what they tell you could make a product better, or it could, make the next event, more exciting, or it could change the way the company's structure is worked. And I think like that is a bit of a trust and a promise that the information that they're giving you will be used for like good, not evil, right? And so, yeah, making that space where people feel like comfortable enough to open up.
You brought back something very important, like you wouldn't be as successful of a designer if you didn't have all this experience that you gained being a volunteer. Would you give people advice how to look at the volunteering, like for IDSA, for example, not only as giving, but also as something that you can use for your own good? How you can benefit from doing all this free work for your career, for your skills, for what type of designer you would become.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of other volunteers for IDSA say you get out of it what you put into it. And I would say that's really true. And you can have a sort of like light relationship with a volunteer org and, attend events and have a small interaction with the community and enjoy that. Or you can dive in and create like lifelong friendships with people who, if I can't even count on all my fingers and toes, the friends I've made at IDSA, let alone the benefit to my career. I think it's really powerful to be at a point in your career that you are shaping the industry, but I haven't even hit like 10 years yet, right? I'm like pretty early on and I get this chance to have an impact. And so I don't know, like in the workplace, being consulted is like, hey, you kind of know what's out there. Like the, sales folks or leadership will say like, hey, what is the industry looking like? And being able to say like, I actually can answer that. I have a perspective. And it's just like, I get to talk to, through the events, hundreds and hundreds of designers a year who I would never have access to speak to people this cool, including like folks like you guys, or all of the speakers, all of the events that I get to coordinate with and work with, the panels I get to moderate. I have met some of just the most incredible designers that I look up to. Even if I'm not forming a relationship, just the chance to meet so many of these people and interact with them. I feel like when I started like planning the events and not just attending them, I realized the value there is in getting to reach out to these really cool people and say like, hey, I have an event. Do you want to speak at that? And you're speaking with the validity of an organization like IDSA. So people think you're legitimate. You are legitimate.
We just uncovered that.
Shh, don't tell. But then you get to oh my God, I was like 1 year out of school when I emailed T and I was like, hey, you want to speak at this event? Like I would have no excuse and no reason to send her a message and she would have no reason to answer. It just gives you this great excuse to just like go meet like really awesome people and get involved in stuff that I think about the events that I've hosted in the last couple of years on entrepreneurship and sustainability and AI and emerging technology and business. And these are all topics that in order to host events on or to say something meaningful, I had to like do research and understand what all these spaces are like and what's important to the community and go out and talk to other designers and see what they want to hear, talk to the speakers, see what they want to say. And like, oh my God, I'm just soaking it all up. And like every one of these conversations, I feel like I'm learning so much and taking so much away from those interactions. So, definitely selfishly, I'm like, I want to meet all my heroes and invite them to speak. But, then also of like the experience of like getting to do that coordination, and I'm learning skills that I felt very comfortable leading my first project because I had already run a $10,000 event. I knew how to balance a budget, how to write a proposal, how to ask for an amount of money and then not get any more money and you need to deliver. And like that was stuff I got to practice, for IDSA before I had to do it like in my job. But by the time I did it for work, I felt a little more prepared.
Those are very tangible, like hard skills that you're talking about. But I'm also curious. I think that one of the things that makes us good at being part of a volunteer group like this is our community focus and sort of community building elements, which are skills that I would say are less valued typically on like paper, right? Has this role enhanced your self-respect over the fact that you're a person that's really good at that type of work?
I think it certainly validates, like if I have a title and a role, it feels to me like, oh yeah, you really can do this. Like it's on paper. But I liked what you're saying about the intangibles, because I would say like, I've never figured out a good way to like put it on a resume or list it as a skill. But I feel like one of the things that I love doing is like lifting other people up or like setting them up for success. And like some of the speakers that I've like found to put on stage, or like conversations that I've gotten the chance to start, or just like recommend a person for thing at just the right time. Like those I feel like are the really exciting and tangible moments where I'm like almost like catalyzing something. And like you're sort of, I might not benefit, but like if I can connect my friend who's incredible at this with a hiring manager who's looking for that exactly, and then they can go like pair up and that person has their dream job, or if I can get somebody on stage to talk about something that I think the world needs to hear, and then lo and behold, they blow up and everybody loves them. And it's just kind of this match made in heaven where you get to, just like set other people up for success and make the world a more, bigger place. Like I'm not here to put myself on stage or like for myself to be in the spotlight. I'm actively uncomfortable speaking about myself. So I appreciated this invite as a challenge to me. I don't talk about myself much. I'm far more comfortable jumping on stage, introducing the speakers, hyping them up, and then stepping aside and letting the speakers do their thing. So I think in that sense, being forced up into more of a leadership role has made me force me to acknowledge a little bit of my strengths, because you can't be shy about what you bring to the table when you're on the board of directors and everybody else in the room is like incredible in their career. I can't be like shy and, pretending that I don't know what I'm doing or like overly humble. I think that it does kind of force you to step up in that respect. But yeah, I don't know. It's been, I think this is a good kind of position to be in, to be able to like foster others and start conversations that you don't need to like be responsible for where they go, but you want people to at least start like thinking about things, or, just start cooking and see where it goes.
The way you talk about the community work, it's almost as if it's your hobby or like free time, fancy thing, but it's actually really hard work, especially on such a big scale. How do you manage all of that? Because you have a full-time job as a designer where you have to deliver. You manage so much for IDSA and you like don't get tired of it. This work-life balance, where does it go in your case?
Yeah. So I was curious about that question myself last year. So I did a time study on myself.
Researching everything.
Classic. You are all about the data. We love it.
I really am. So for 6 months, I tracked everything I did down to the 15-minute interval.
Oh, I'm officially afraid of you. Oh my God.
I'm sorry. I know. I just came out like this, I swear. And because I was actually really worried about exactly what you're describing. I was like, am I burning the candle at both ends? Am I being unfair to myself? Like, I feel like I always sign up for things that I like. I'm so excited and I want to do stuff. And then I'm like, but am I overextending? And I think what I realized is that I feel like I don't give myself credit sometimes for some of the other balancing things that I do, and also for the like just genuine joy that the volunteering brings me. I was actually hosted an event last week for IDSA, which is about work-life balance, coincidentally. And we were having a conversation at that event about, like how your cup gets filled. And everyone was talking about the things they do outside of work, whether like volunteering with a prosthetic company to design prosthetics, or making woodworking or art. And I was like, oh, I'd never thought about it this way, but I feel like designing the conferences, like not the community part, but like the conference design, that's my like woodworking, or, like I'm a designer. I have to be creative outside of work somehow. So like I do that part. But yeah, so in that time study, I found out that I only spend about 10 hours a week on IDSA stuff, which I thought it was a lot more time than that. And I think 10 hours sounds like a lot, but I'll put in a big caveat that my company has been really willing to work with me. Like part of the reason I was able to say yes to this board role in the position that I have is because I was able to negotiate that with my company to get some of that time, that some of that 10 hours a week I get to spend at Kaleidoscope during the day, like as part of my work. And so when I got offered the board role, I said, hey, I really want to take this, but if I were to go to all the conferences I'm supposed to plan, I would have no vacation. And if I were to do this, I would have no social life. And I would love to do this. I really would. But in order to do that, I might need some accommodations from the workplace side. I think that this is going to bring a ton of value to Kaleidoscope. I think that this is going to bring a lot to the table. And I kind of pitched to my boss, a VP and CEO, to basically say, I think that this is something that you should let me do because it's good for the company. Also, on top of being good for me. And, they don't want me to burn out either. And so I would say I spend, it depends, but like 2 to 4 hours a week at work doing IDSA stuff that I can like bill as non-billable work. And sometimes I flex that, depends how busy I am, but it lets me like take calls during the middle of the day. Or they gave me the time to go to the conferences as paid time off. So I don't have to use up all my vacation just to do my IDSA volunteer work. And I'm going to be honest, those accommodations are probably the difference between me being able to do this work sustainably and to not be able to do it sustainably.
Right.
So I think that kind of just asking for what I needed was a big part of that.
It's really, really smart to encourage people to actually ask for that. I mean, I've definitely never asked a company for that. I don't know if Ginger and Margaret have. I think Ginger has a little bit more support. But like you're saying,
And
it shows you the priorities.
Efficiency.
It shows you the priorities of your company, and also like is a good drop in the bucket of if it's a place that's a good place for you to be working. And then of course, even though I think you're very, very like hardworking and you probably don't burn out as easily as some of the rest of us, it does make more sense when we understand that it's like part of how you've built your professional week. So yeah, that's cool.
And thank you for being honest with us and don't, not try and render yourself as a superhero, but like you want to be there, you need to adjust things, not to go crazy and not like.
She still kind of is a superhero. If you ever move to Seattle, we can't wait to have you join our board. It'll be so much fun. Amazing.
I mean, I'm just so jealous of like some of these communities where there's just so many more designers in a city. I'm from Ohio, so I always had to like travel to Chicago if I wanted to like hang out with designers.
You guys have to travel to France to see a good garment. This sounded like the most made-up business trip a client ever signed off. But a good job.
Yeah, the more you talked about the impact of it, I was like, okay, yeah. But like to act as though the only underwear is in France, I feel like somebody just really wanted to go to France.
I think you're spot on. Someone was like, how do I get my trip to Paris paid for?
Seriously?
Oh, I should do lingerie research.
Amazing.
I mean, listen, I'm saying that and I'm about to like leave like 3 days early for a research trip just to hang out with a friend in California. So
heck yeah.
I mean, I'm all for it. Yeah. But I think too, like we talked about work-life balance. I think something also is like, I put a lot of time and effort into like my mental health and well-being. And I mean, I'm not neurotypical and I have like my own things that I need to deal with as well and unpack and, address in my own life and my personal growth. But I spend like a lot of time reflecting and thinking about my goals and how I show up in the world and what I bring to the table and like, gotta have your meditation apps so you're not too stressed out. You've got to have your annual goals. And like, I really like all that kind of like self-growth and betterment stuff. And I love sharing that with other friends. Like I know you guys have had Lindsay Malatesta on the podcast. She's someone else that I like love sharing those goals and aspirations with and like reflecting on that career growth and like having, I think, both the tools and skills to keep yourself balanced and healthy. And then also the village, the community I'm not serving this community. These are my people. These are my like friends. They are not people that I have a responsibility to in the same way that I do with like the IDSA community. And so I can just be real with them and I can tell them what's not working. And I don't have to constantly show up as the professional board member. I can just like, bitch if something is not working for me and I can just let loose. And I think having those people for like, I talk about design with design people and they get it. And that is, I love like my husband and my friends in the real world, but they just, sometimes there's something about like ID that you need to talk to other ID people about. And I think that having a village of people who get it, who know you well and who are there to like listen and support you through everything, I don't think I could have done any of it without them, to be honest. So there's a lot of pieces that go into keeping the volunteering machine rolling for sure.
That's an incredibly sweet call out. And yeah, I think we feel the same way about the people that we've built connections with on like especially the WID side of things.
Mm-hmm.
You're really helping us with our transitions in this episode, because what I want to ask you is, what it is that you bring to the table that makes you, a really important asset to any team, the reason you need a seat there.
I think of all the things, maybe it's the ability to make connections. And I mentioned the term like catalyst earlier. There's a book that I love called, and actually T gave me this book because she was like, oh, this is me in a nutshell. This is you in a nutshell. This book will help you. It's called, oh my gosh, let's see. Oh my, I'm like blanking on the title. It's like Go Fast, Go Hard, Burnout, or something like that. The term burnout is in the title. I will remember what it's called and look it up for you. And the idea behind this book is there's like these people who are just like connectors, and they just like make those dot connections and like, maybe have also the follow through to like understand what the benefit of those connection is and where they're going. And so I feel like this shows up when I'm, like on a project, can come up with like, oh, well, this other thing from this other category is, oh, what a perfect solution. Like this kind of buckle from that backpack would be such a great solution here. And it's totally out of the blue, but just making those connections there. Or like, oh, I think that this speaker would be an amazing fit for that event. I think that what they could say would really add on to what that other person is saying. Just trying to think about like stitching together the whole picture using these points of connection. And I think that's something I just like love doing, but also something that I feel like is a big value bringing to the table. Like, in my teams internally, I do a lot of like resourcing people and talent and like figuring out like who's really good at what and who can flex and who, is set up to learn and grow and excel in this area. And I feel like matching up the person with the thing that they thrive at is like, ooh, that is magic to me.
We have the book title. Move fast, break shit, burn out.
Thank you. There it is. Yes, it is a good one. And actually I think what I liked about that book is it's like you can't avoid burning out. And I won't pretend that I like never go through periods where I'm like, I'm overwhelmed. I can't do anything. I'm so tired. I need like 3 weeks to not talk to anybody. And the book kind of goes into the idea that like, okay, if you're going to like go through these cycles and you get really excited about stuff and maybe you overextend or over-index yourself, but just knowing what your strategies are to shorten that burnout or to maybe like get ahead of it, maybe make it not happen, but to at least know that like if it does, that you're really well equipped. So a lot of the strategies I mentioned, I totally took right from that book.
Well, Kat, thank you so much for being here talking to us today. It's been a really, really nice time getting to know you on this deeper level. And we're happy that our audience gets to hear how much care you put into your work.
This is a lovely conversation. And I really appreciate it also, I think, some of the like resonance with what it feels like to show up as a woman in this industry and in this workplace. And, I hear that from a lot of folks. And I think being part of like women in design, it's like this bid for connection and bid for like more people like us talking about things like this. And so just really a huge honor to be a part of this conversation and to get to know you guys as well a little bit better. It was so fun listening to your podcast live last year. And I've just been, listening ever since and just great to get a chance to be on here and chat with you guys.
Thank you. Where should people come find you if they'd like to connect, ask more questions, or maybe even know more about the conferences that you have been organizing coming up?
Probably the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I have an Instagram that I post on like once a year, maybe. But probably LinkedIn is the best place to find me. And if you're interested in IDSA's events, you can check them out at idsa.org. We have our Women in Design deep dive coming up in June in Philadelphia. I'm super excited.
Woohoo!
Yeah, this event, not to brag, but the Women in Design Committee has been absolutely killing it. I'm so excited. They've just been getting more involved in the event planning as time goes on. And this year, I think it's going to be the best yet. But yeah, so lots of good stuff coming up for the year ahead. And I'd say if anyone's, listening and feels really passionately about a particular event or topic or something that they really want IDSA to address, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to have a conversation really with anyone who wants to share their opinion. And yeah, part of what I do is like listen to folks and, try to bring their vision to reality. So I'd love to, take that feedback.
Amazing. Well, we are the WID Seattle group. You can find our Instagram, WID_Seattle, and we have a really awesome website, beyondwaypodcast.com. Thanks.
And please subscribe to us on Spotify.
Absolutely. And rate us nicely. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.